Wow. That's around 16 minutes.
Come over here.
Just your regular login. I mean, we're recording it and streaming on the OBS software. They use the standard software, so it's being.
But I need to keep them on the road.
Yeah, sure. Yes, please, actually, go ahead.
Did you go to state? Did you go to state meeting?
Yeah. That's my committee or is it over? No, we have to just do the invitation.
Well, we have audio and video, I don't know about Zoom for now.
Okay, well, go ahead and.
You're live.
We're live. Ready to roll? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day and welcome to the regular session of the Salt Lake City Council for Monday, February 14th. I'll call the meeting to order right now at, what is that, 6:52? Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Clark,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante,
Here.
Councilmember Arona,
Here.
Councilmember Thomas,
Here.
Mayor Urick.
Here. Councilmember Thomas, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand, place your right hand over your heart and repeat with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. And we'll move right on down. The first item up on the agenda is the presentation by the Rotary.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members and staff. My name is Tammy Westwood, and I'm the Executive Director of the Salt Lake Friendship House, but I'm also the current President of the San Ynez Valley Rotary Club. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about. We are the oldest club in the valley. We've been here 63 years. And some of the projects that we've been working on over these last several years are we provide dictionaries to all the third graders in the San Ynez Valley. We coordinate the high school architectural competition every year. You've probably seen Santa's sleigh around Christmas time. We're the ones who drive Santa around and his little elves and go see all the kids and give out little goodies. We funded the Sunny Fields Park project, and every year we volunteer to go paint, clean up, the Rotarians do, and it just helps keep down some of the labor expenses for the park. And then of course the 4th of July fireworks celebration, and like I said, that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So, I'm here to ask you, the City of Salt Lake, to partner with the San Ynez Valley Rotary Club to bring our community back together. It's been 2 years to celebrate the 4th of July. So I'm asking you to partner with us this year. Over 25 years ago is when we started the 4th of July. It was conceived by our Rotary, and we decided it would be a safe alternative to driving to Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, Lompoc, and to have the fireworks here in our own backyard. The event has since grown to over 5,000 attendees every year. And of those, I think that's probably one of the biggest events in the city. And of those 5,000 attendees, about 71% of those attendees come from outside of the San Ynez Valley. We did a survey a few years ago. And then we also, kind of a benefit is for those who live close to the mission where we do the fireworks show, they get a free fireworks show. And people who can see it from, the mission. So that's a free fireworks show for them, and while they're hosting their private 4th of July parties. So this is our only fundraising event. It's the money that we raise stays all here in our community. And how we've been able to do that is we provide grants to different nonprofits here in the valley, such as the Solvang and Buellton Senior Centers, Solvang Festival Theater, People Helping People, the Alvacoy Museum, Veggie Rescue, Nature Track, and the Solvang Friendship House. And you see several of those organizations serve our vulnerable population seniors, and I know that's one of the priorities of the City of Salt Lake, and so we've done a lot with seniors over the last few years. We provide scholarships to the local graduating high school seniors. During COVID this last year, we supported with financial assistance the local food banks and the food distribution sites here in the valley, with over $40,000 in relief, so we gave them grants. We also gave several of the volunteers gift cards that we purchased from local restaurants, which went back into the community, and we gave them to go use as a thank you. Just this last month, we've given out $4,500 in gift cards to all of the 311 teachers in the valley. And it was just it was during Gratitude Week, and it was just thank them for everything that they've done for our valley, for our students, and everything during this pandemic. The Solvang, the San Ynez Valley Rotary has given over $1 million, and 90% of that comes from the proceeds of the 4th of July. The 4th of July, I think, has become expected in the valley. It's very anticipated. I've been on this committee for many years, and as president, I'll get emails and I'll get phone calls of people from all over asking, are we gonna have a show? They come from all over the community. And the tourists, as I mentioned, 71% are from outside of this area. That not only helps us to raise money, but it helps the city of Solvang. Obviously, they're staying in the hotels, they're eating at the local restaurants, doing the wine tasting and visiting the local merchants. So it's for the community, but it's also benefiting, I think, Solvang as well with tourism. We also have over 1,000 military and active military and their families that attend every year. That's because we honor them with free admission, so they're from all over California. But due to the pandemic, we have had to cancel the 4th of July for the last 2 years, which has significantly decreased our fundraising. And as with everything, expenses are going up. 2 years ago, when we did produce the 4th of July, it was $54,000 in expenses. This year, we're expecting about $70,000, so it's going up a significant amount. There's a lot of expenses associated with the show, which I don't think a lot of people realize, but obviously there's permits, we have to get liability insurance, the sound and the lighting we have to rent, canopies that we pay for and rent, generator rentals, the porta potties, security, waste management, event management, and of course the fireworks, which is the biggest expense. So I want to thank you. The City of Solvang has been sponsoring our fireworks show for many years. And I'm asking you this year to consider giving us a $25,000 grant. That will help pay for the fireworks. And if you were to give us that $25,000, you would become a presenting sponsor with the fireworks. So we would partner. And basically how that would be advertised is the City of Solvang and San Ynez Valley Rotary proudly presents the 4th of July fireworks celebration. So I'm thinking together we can work through this. It's been 2 years. Everyone wants to get out and celebrate the 4th, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for both of us to give the community an amazing show. And so I look forward to working with all of you. And I want to thank you all for your time. And if you have any questions.
Thank you, Tammy. Are there any questions this time?
No?
No.
Okay.
No. I think that was pretty
Okay.
straight.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg, too, for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for everything that you guys do for the community as a whole. That's amazing. So, I don't think we make a decision right now on that, just.
Yeah, it is scheduled as a presentation, but we'll continue to work with all the organizations through your upcoming budget meetings to where you'll be able to make those decisions very soon.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to public communication. Madam Clerk, would you please read the instructions on that?
Council welcomes your input at this time. You may address the council on items not on the agenda and the consent agenda. Time limit is 3 minutes. We will start with in-person public comment first.
All right, and I do not have any speaker slips up here. Is there anyone in the audience right now wishing to speak on anything that's not on the agenda? Do we have Zoom available or anybody out there?
We have a couple of participants on Zoom. If anybody on Zoom would like to speak on items not on the agenda, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. Seeing none.
Seeing none? All right, thank you. Bringing that back, moving on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Apologies to everybody that we started a little late as we have some technical difficulties connecting, so we have the feed going out to cable and YouTube, but those of you participating on Zoom, you are on a laptop with me, and I'll try to show you as much of the audience as we go through this meeting tonight. But we'll make sure that you're able to hear, and you can also log into YouTube if you would like to have a better view. So I'll start with an update on COVID-19 and the changes in regulations that are coming from the state. The Santa Barbara Public Health Department decided to rescind their standing order, which requires everyone to wear face coverings when indoors. That order is going to be rescinded as of Wednesday. So as of Wednesday, only non-vaccinated individuals will be required to wear a mask indoors, while everybody else is no longer going to be required. However, the county still continues to recommend facial coverings. With that, tomorrow there's going to be an event at 4 o'clock for the Chamber of Commerce, who are celebrating, continue to celebrate their 100th year anniversary. So tomorrow at 4 o'clock, there is a time capsule ceremony that will be held right outside of the Peasants Feast off of Copenhagen. And the city, at the idea of the mayor, took a photo commemorating the city staff and city council that will go into the time capsule.
Well, that's fun.
They could have photoshopped that.
Looks great. All right, so moving on to updates of where we are with several large projects. We've got the utility rate study going forward. We held a workshop this past Saturday in the morning at 10 o'clock. We had a few attendees with us in person and also on Zoom. We got some very good questions. It wasn't a lot of attendees, but good questions that we, with the consultant and the staff, will definitely look at closely as we work towards the final recommendations. So in March of 2022, we'll be bringing final recommendations to the City Council and recommendations to set the Prop 218 hearing. In April and May, following that setting of the hearing, we will do some additional public outreach to the community. And in June, there would be a 218 hearing and a rate adoption if the council elects to adopt the newly proposed rates, which would then go into effect as of July 1, 2022, and will be reflected in the revenue projections for the next financial plan. General plan update is moving along. We have an item that's a milestone item today on your council agenda later today. So today we are looking for preliminary review of alternatives report and community input collected at the January 13 community workshop, and there is also the survey. So we won't be asking you to take any action when we get to this item later today, but the consultant is here who will present all of the results that we have collected from the community. And then the next steps will be that the GPAC will be meeting on a preferred alternative, and the goal of that meeting for the GPAC will be to come up with a preferred alternative, which doesn't have to be any of the alternatives listed in the report. So the draft, we call it, so alternative report listed some different land use options, A, B, and C. The actual alternative preferred could be any combination. So the GPAC will be working on that before a proposed March 7 joint session between the City Council and the Planning Commission, and we would be coming to you with a recommendation to adopt a preferred alternative. So that would be a joint meeting between the City Council and the Planning Commission, March 7th. Once again, just reminding where we are with the financial plan development. The next milestone will be February 26th, which is a Saturday at 10 a.m. It will be held here at the Solomon Chamber, City Hall Council Chambers. And it will be a session for the City Council to set your goals for the next financial plan. We are in the process of developing the 2-year financial plan, and the goals that U.S. Council set would drive all of our efforts and our priorities and work programs for the next 2 years. That includes all of our operations and our capital improvement program investments.
Hey, Dave, can you move that Perrier bottle over or something? I can't see it on that screen. Yeah, that's great, thank you.
And then in March and April, the council will continue to review operations, recommendations, as well as any of the grant requests or special requests that you have received from community organizations, such as the Senior Center and the Theater Fest, which are large community-funded projects. And then you just heard from the Rotary. I also heard from the Danish Days that they will be coming forward with a request. And of course, you have your grant funding policy, which sets a priority for senior services, essentially. And then in May, we'll come back to you based on your goals and all those discussions with the final recommendations, which will be in the form of the preliminary financial plan, which will then come back to you, or we will receive your final comments and turn those over for final adoption in June. Now, the solving districting for elections process is continuing on. We do have now the draft maps that are posted online. These maps are developed based on the feedback that was received during the last two public hearings, and just the population, the need to keep the minority population together, and then also divide the population equally. So anyone can now go to districtsolving.org and look at these maps and submit any comments for us to review. And then we will have the first public hearing on these maps scheduled for March 7th. A time certain will be posted, which will be followed by a second required hearing on March 28th with a deadline or a goal to have the council adopt a preferred map by April 11th and then get the results to the county by April 17th. An update on where we are with the different committees and commissions. The Design Review Committee meeting is going to occur in this Thursday, February 17 of 2022. We will be starting with a joint session between the DRC and the Planning Commission, who are going to be, based on the Planning Commission's request, they will be holding a meeting to further discuss the proposed changes to Title 11. So Title 11 is the changes, there's several changes, but what we're really focusing on is the role and the interaction between the Planning Commission and the Design Review Committee. It was something that was originally brought up as a clarification by the DRC. It has gone to the PC. They will hold this final joint meeting on it, and then those recommendations will be coming back to the City Council for your review and potential modifications to the ordinance for the first hearing. Then we have the regular meeting for the Planning Commission scheduled for also March 7th at 6 p.m. And item for review at that Planning Commission will be consideration of preliminary review, preliminary comments on the old lumberyard project and the updated scope that Ed St. George has submitted to the city. The Tourism Advisory Committee next meeting will be taking place on March 3rd at 3:30 p.m. They did select a new chair, which is Cheryl Schellenberger. And they will also be reviewing the subcommittee recommendations for the RFP and scope of work for the marketing, which will be discussed later today on your agenda. The Copenhagen Closure is currently continues to be closed per your direction, but we are working on some preliminary discussion items on how to move forward and what the potential permanent closure would look like, what the options would be, and how much that might cost. The access to parking lot is open now, and one update I wanted to make sure that everybody knows here is that the farmers market location was modified because of the reopening of half of a block to open parking lot 2. So the farmers market lost quite a bit of space, and they are going into the busy season. So in order to accommodate the farmers This was presented to the Planning Commission as well for their general comment. The location has been modified to where, in addition to the Copenhagen closure on that Wednesday, we will be closing portion of the first street between the two alleys. So it basically creates this cross type of intersection, which provides with a lot more space for the farmers market. Now moving on to the advanced calendar, on February 28th, we'll come back to you with a discussion on the Copenhagen Drive closure, preliminary discussion. There also has been some discussion during your meeting on January 27th for the financial plan, to where there was some desire to look into different tax measures for the sales tax and the TOT increases, and potentially formation of a business improvement district. So there would be an item coming to you seeking your further direction, whether that is something that you would like to consider. And I will be coming back with the Title 11 ordinance changes, which I just mentioned, that has been worked on by the Planning Commission and the Design Review Committee. The branding for TRC signage and website updates, that is something that the branding or Design Review Committee will be considering this Thursday as the final recommendations and work product from IDK or Cox and Marble on that branding. And then as an annual report, we'll be coming to you with a Measure A, 5-year local program projects recommendations, and then finally we'll be coming to you with a recommendation for solving park improvements as well. And that concludes my report.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
I have one question. The meeting with the planning commission, the 7th, we're still having the 14th meeting though, the regular city council, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is the adjustment that they're thinking for the farmer's market, would they need to do that if we just bumped it out for the day on Wednesday? To take it out to where it was before? You know, where it was before we made this modification to the parking lot? We would just opened it up like we had prior to where the bollards are on 2nd and Copenhagen. Would they need to take all of that on first? Just for that day as a special event? I mean,
That could be considered, but that's not their preferred alternative. They were already tight on Copenhagen as is, so they're really happy with this new configuration right now.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I did, I'm gonna make a deviation just in case, because I know Hank showed up late and I overheard that he couldn't get on Zoom, so I just wanted to ask if it's possible if I could go back to public comment. Do you have public comment that you'd like to make on something not in the agenda?
Correct.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was having Valentine's Day dinner and kind of trying to watch a council meeting, but it wasn't coming up on YouTube.
Yeah, we were having Zoom. We got started way late, so we were having Zoom issues.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Hank Homburg. I live here in Solvang. I would like to speak tonight with regard to our increasing contract costs with the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. As the mayor, council members, and city administrators, you know the primary function of your position is to manage and administer all facets of city operations in an efficient and fiscally sound manner. Public safety is your primary responsibility of city government, along with public works and monitoring our infrastructure, such as roads, water, wastewater treatment. They all require fiscally sound planning. The issue with the Sheriff's Department is that they have significantly increased our contract cost by 35%, and we still only have one assigned deputy. This increase also affected the neighboring town of Gilton, along with Carpinteria, I believe also. Basically, at this juncture, we have no policing options, which is a mandatory or monopoly of sorts for the contract cities and taxpayers. It is my understanding that for this contract, for one deputy, it's costing the city of Solvang close to $3 million annually. The Sheriff's Department requires full cost recovery. To meet that requirement, we also are being billed per incident. Solvang and other contract cities are helping pay the costs throughout the county response areas. For these reasons, I would like to urge council to consider a feasibility study to look into the policing options beyond Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. I have contacted Mr. Wolf, who is the city administrator for the city of Buellton, and he too concurs and feels that it may be an absolutely viable option to do a feasibility study jointly with the city of Solvang. The joint police agency may, in fact, be a viable option and fiscally sound option for Solvang, Buellton, and possibly even the Chumash Casino. Please consider looking into this and maybe contacting and communicating with Buellton and the casino. Thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Hank, appreciate those comments. All right, we'll close public comment unless there's any possibly on Zoom right now, just to double check. If there's any people that have been
Would anybody else on Zoom like to make a comment on items not on the agenda? If so, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. See none.
No, okay. I'll bring it back then. So we'll move on to item number 3, council comments. Is there any comments right now from any council members or reports?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I want to commend the Solvang Parks and Rec and Buellton Parks and Rec for throwing a fantastic valley-wide teenage dance. Had the chance to chaperone the event, and it was great to see all of the kids enjoying the dance. The DJ was fantastic. The picture taking booth was great as well. And I hope that we can have more events in the future, because it's really enriching and really lovely to see everybody coming together. So thank you.
Is that your first one?
Yes, that is my first one.
Very interesting, very fun. Councilmember Thomas.
You know, briefly, Cal City's Public Safety Committee met for the first time this last week. And most of it was introductory, but we will be focusing on statewide retail theft, firefighting, mutual aid, Cal OSHA Office of Emergency Services, and cannabis tax reform. And I'll keep you up to date as we get more into those as the year goes by.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, last week I had a meeting with Allison, the head of the Goleta Library, to discuss our goals and how we can work together on library issues. That was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I had my first meeting of the ad hoc library committee with county supervisors and other appointed people. And then Thursday, we had our actual LA Library Advisory Committee meeting, which I was participating in as well. So we're on a good path with the libraries.
All right, excellent. Any other comments? I have a few here, just coming up. On Friday, this past Friday, on February 11th, the 2020 California Citizens Redistricting Commission announced the absence of a lawsuit challenging the new Congressional, Senate, Assembly, and Board of Equalization maps. So basically, according to the Charter, Article 21, Section 3, Parent B, Parent 2 of the California Constitution, that any registered voter can actually file a petition for writ of mandate or a writ of prohibition within 45 days after the commission has certified a final map that has been sent to the Secretary of State. Those maps were certified to the Secretary of State on December 27, 2021. So the deadline to file was last Thursday at midnight, so that time has passed. However, that does not mean that there are other not legal challenges that can happen. You have a 90-day window from that same time frame, which would end on March 27th of 2022, that there can be a referendum petition that can be filed within this 90 days going forward. Absent that, the maps and the districts will become effective on March 27th of 2022. So it behoove everyone to kind of look at the maps that they've come up with, because at this point, that's what it's looking like. Our districts are going to be here for all of our state types of elections. Every 10 years, they're updated based on the census information that's given. And so California has to redraw the boundaries, and that's for its electoral districts, and that's so that the state's population is evenly allocated among the new districts. So that's just that little bit of information for everyone. This year, I believe we have some new assembly districts, and of course, we're also working on county districts coming down for new supervisorial districts going forward as well. Also at the state level, just a drought update. Following the substantial rain and snowfall in December, January, of course, as everyone knows, has been extremely dry. Following all the rain that we had in December, the statewide CR snowpack had gone from 160% of average at the beginning of January to on February 1st to below average now in just that 31 days. So again, there are a number of states or counties that are in drought mandates right now throughout California, as we are. Just make sure that we are trying to meet our goal of 20% cutback as much as possible. We would really appreciate that. For information, just real quick, information on state drought actions and assistance, you can go to www.drought.cal.ca.gov, and or for conservation tips and resources, consumers can also go to saveourwater.com. So those are two statewide websites available for that. SBCAG, I'll be attending a meeting on Thursday coming up, but there was a spotlight that just this past January and was finalized on February 4th. Our state senator Monique Lamone was selected to serve on the Senate Transportation Committee. That actually bodes really well for us that we have a local contact right in there. These are going to be issues coming forward with the state transportation plans that all of the state and every district is part of having to develop. Caltrans has a new website now that if you go to it, you can look at it for District 5. Solvang is in District 5. Obviously, we have Highway 246, a state highway, as our main street, same with Buellton. But you can go to catplan, CATPLAN.org/district-5. And you can go to their website and you can find out what they have planned for our highway. That we really, we're doing the general plan, but they are updating their transportation plan for every single state highway, whether it's a main highway or bisecting routes is the way they term that. Something for everyone to really kind of pay attention to, especially after reading a lot of the comments that are related to routing and things, transportation for solving in our general plan. Another website that has just come on board is the SBCAG, sbcag.org/broadband.html. And that's a new website that just came on board last week, and it's basically to talk about the broadband strategic plan for this year, but going forward, all of the plans that are going. We are part of the district as SBCAG, and there's a broadband ad hoc committee, but most of the meetings are not open to the public. At some points, the ad hoc committee meetings are not, but there are other meetings that are. So just to be upfront, knowing what is going on with the broadband that's coming through, because that is one of the infrastructures that Santa Barbara County is really partnering with other counties around the area to try to get that available to us. I think that's all I have for right now on that. And then as far as the numbers from the food bank, back in January 25, seems like a month ago. Households, numbers were up from the week before. There was 174 households served, individuals 667. On February 1, it was down a little bit. Households were 163, individuals were 628. And then on last Tuesday, it was back up again. Households were 191, individuals 759. First time actually going to the distribution were 19. There are still resources available. I got this from the assemblyman, but if you go to covid19.ca.gov, it will help. It gives you ideas and assistance programs that are out there if whoever is struggling still with COVID-19 and needing financial assistance. That is still available from the state. So that's what I think I had. I wanted to thank all the city staff that was able to make it for that photo. It was kind of a last minute thought, but I think it'd be really great, and I appreciate everyone that made the effort to get out. And I think that's all I have for right now. Well, I guess, okay, well, I'll say one last thing, and that's on a personal level, after much discussion, I have decided to retire from the Sheriff's Department, so I will be retiring effective March 31 of this year. So I will actually be a little bit more available. I think going forward with all of the stuff that we have available and the extra committees that are going, I will be retired. I will be coming back as extra help, so you'll still see me a little bit out there, but hopefully helping out on some of the events going forward. But I feel really good about this. It's kind of great because Councilmember Thomas was my sheriff, and it's.
You'll be missed.
I wasn't gonna do this.
You'll be missed.
Thank you for taking a chance on an old guy. And I think it seems fitting that we actually back together again on the same team. So it's a good way to go. So I want to appreciate the Sheriff's Department. Thank you all for everything.
Proud of you, Charlie.
Mayor,
That's it.
thank you for announcing this, because I've known it for a couple of days, and I've taken the liberty to let at least a few staff members know, or those who have worked with you for a long time. So I want to present you with this plaque and a card from the staff, and we have a couple of staff members here sitting, hoping you were making this announcement. So the plaque says, Mayor, this plaque is presented to you in appreciation of your 17 years of service to the community of Solvang as Community Services Deputy. Thank you and congratulations on your retirement from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, City of Solvang staff.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you very much.
On Valentine's Day,
Good working with you guys. Oh, I still will. I know. Oh.
Sure. Come off real fast. Come on. Pretend it's the 16th. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right.
Wow, good. Thank you. Thank you. That's my daughter. My granddaughter will love that.
Would you take one more, please?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. 2 or all?
Yeah,
What do we
no,
do?
everybody.
All right.
Yeah. This is great.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
That was great. Thank you. Appreciate this.
we have Lieutenant Green who would like to say a couple of words as well on Zoom. We'll try to make it work. Jeff, can you talk? Oh, there you go. Now we can hear you.
All right. First, I'm gonna have to transition out of calling you Mr. Mayor for a moment. Charlie, I can't tell you how much you've done for the valley the people of Solvang, and for our department. It's crushing me that I'm losing you and Mike, both of you. And I understand and I love it that you're gonna be happy and retired, and it will give you more free time probably to do a bunch of other things that you deserve to do. But I want you to know that you are irreplaceable, you and Mike both. And I'll miss you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. That was my last boss right there.
Now you have 5,800 bosses.
I know. Was it that many? I thought it was only 57, 27.
That's okay, you still have the CCW.
Yeah. All right, thank you for that. Wipe my eye, I can't even see what I'm saying in here.
Yeah, that was touching.
Try not to do that. Moving on to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, would you please read the items on the consent agenda?
Consent agenda, approval of agenda as presented. Item 4B, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of January 24, 2022, and the Financial Plan Development Workshop of January 27, 2022. 4C, approve accounts payable and accounts receivable for the month of January 2022. 4D, adopt resolution number 221156, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Solvang, California, authorizing remote teleconference meetings of the City Council and other bodies. Item 4E, adopt resolution 221157, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Solvang, California, authorizing submittal of applications for all Cal Recycle grants for which the City of Solvang is eligible. Item 4G, approve budget adjustment request in the amount of $149,000 for custodial services and $15,000 for restroom supplies for restrooms 2 and 3. Item 4H, approve contract with the Santa Ynez Valley Hotel Association, Inc., DBA Visit the Santa Ynez Valley for Tourism Business Improvement District Administration for the term of July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2027.
All right, are there any council people that wish to pull any items or have any questions regarding any items?
Yeah, a couple questions, please, if I may.
Go ahead.
H, it says approved contact. Should that be approved contract with Santa Ynez Valley? Okay. That just a typo. Also, on page 9 of the agenda, which is the draft minutes, it says under number 9, down at the bottom of the page, second paragraph, discussion followed regarding Caltrans rate of returns. I think it was CalPERS rate of returns.
That's correct. I'll make that correction.
Okay, that's all.
Any other comments? I had a couple. Page 7 on the minutes, on the last bit of my discussion there, and a career fair hosted by Santa Ynez High School, as opposed to Solvang High School. On page 11, the comments that were ascribed to Mr. Jim Richardson. He provided a brief history of the senior center, not the fire department. I had a question, and I don't know if I got it down right, but I just wanted to clarify. On page 15 of the vendor numbers that I had asked about, under the Department of 1400 Tourism, and I just wanted to clarify, Rafael Garcia, Air Sage Incorporated, Frontier Communications, and Griffin Publishing all have the exact same vendor ID number. And they didn't know if that's done because I understand they're all under tourism, but
I see the department, the name, the payable number, the posting date, the description, and the account number. So there's no vendor number.
Is the, under account numbers? The account numbers are the,
That's
I'm
an,
sorry, the account numbers are identical.
it's an expenditure account, so all of those expenditures have been classified under the
Underneath that.
same nature.
I just want to make sure I understood it. Okay. That was all I had. I just wanted to clarify that. So, if we don't have any items that need to be pulled, go out for, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, or to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Infante,
Yes.
Councilmember Aruna,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Gehrig.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item number 5. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title of item 5?
Receive report on community input on the general plan update alternative choices and provide staff with general comment and policy direction.
Council, once again, just a reminder where we are in the process with the general plan update. We recently held the community workshop number 3, which was to receive input from the community on alternative land use choices. That report was posted online at www.plansolving.com. We had about 40 attendees on Zoom primarily at that workshop. And then we also had the survey that was posted for a few weeks following the workshop where we collected quite a bit of input, which our consultants have put together and included in your packet today. So what we're looking from you today is to just provide us with some general comments, your impressions, what you're seeing, which will be included in a discussion with the GPAC, who will be meeting on February 22nd. In order to develop a preferred alternative. So we just wanted to make sure that we brought council up to date and heard your initial comments before the GPAC dives into the details of working out the alternative, which will then be once again presented to you as council as well as to the Planning Commission on March 7th for your consideration for approval. With that, we have Brand from Inter Harnish here with us today in person, who will walk us through the presentation and the discussion. Please. Presentation is up, and you have your clicker. There you go.
Perfect. Obviously, I don't want to block your view. I know we're on one screen, but can you hear me through the mic? Does that work? Okay, perfect. So good evening, Mayor, Council. Good to be back here. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yep.
Not a bad place to spend it, I'll say. Just wanted to highlight what the purpose of this portion of the meeting tonight is, to go over a general plan process and timeline, go over the alternatives process just in brief, and then provide an overview of community feedback received, and then have an open dialogue with all of you. If you remember back when we looked at the vision and the guiding principles late last year, the council had made a request that as we get through this process that you receive regular updates and are made aware of community feedback prior to GPAC discussion, so you can act as a guide through that process, since they are an advisory body. So that is why we are here tonight. So I just want to remind us where we are in this process, and as part of the general plan, I've added a new bar here on the bottom. That's the housing element. So we're currently working through your 6th cycle housing element mandated by the state of California. SBCAG through HCD has given Solvang Arena 191. So we are working through the process right now of sites inventory, which is perfect because it's aligning with the alternatives process. This project is through a series of phases. We're currently working in phase 3, moving into phase 4. What we hope for is an adoption in spring of '23. And what I've done here is I've changed this graphic to show you dates and timelines. This will give you a better perspective of where we're heading over the next few months as we move into the latter half of this year. So right now, we're in between 3 and 4. So we're working on the alternatives, we're on the back end, And at the same time, we're also starting to prepare what's known as the policy document. So that includes all of the goals, policies, and then eventual programs that will guide the council and planning commission, as your decision makers, on future projects or decisions that relate to land use, the environment, mobility, and so forth. So we are right in the middle of these two phases here. So just a reminder of the alternatives process. So we started this project back in December of 20. We went through a visioning process that ended up with a set of guiding principles. We went through an existing conditions process, which evaluated Solvang as it is in 2021. That lays the setting for the environmental impact report down the road, and also provides additional data that will drive this process, the alternatives, and future goals and policies. So we rolled out the alternatives report in December. The alternatives report, think of it as a report that looks at big picture ideas of changes that could occur. We're not necessarily saying that these changes will happen. We're not advocating for change in any way. We're here just to lay out a series of alternatives or options just to consider and to see the implications if one was selected over the other. So as part of this process, we created an alternatives report, and that report is posted on the Plan Solvang website, and then we facilitated a community workshop number 3 where we walked through that. The intent of the alternatives report is to lay out, in this process there were 3 alternatives. There was an A, a B, and a C. And as the city manager touched on, when the GPAC meets next Tuesday, they're gonna have the job or the task of reviewing all the community feedback and then coming to a consensus on a GPAC preferred alternative, and they'll make that recommendation to the planning commission. Just because the alternatives report included an A, B, or C doesn't mean that those are static, doesn't mean that those are the final selected choices. The GPAC can pick and choose aspects of each, or can decide no change at all. So that would be moving forward with your current land use designations as they are in your existing general plan, and just looking toward the development of current vacant parcels within the city. So there is a lot of movement still to take place as part of this, and these are just starting points. In the alternatives report, we had A, which we like to call a baseline scenario, or a no change, business as usual. So that looks at no change to your existing land use designation, so no density change, no floor area ratio or FAR, which allows more non-residential square footage. It just sticks with business as usual. B was titled a medium density infill, so it increased the density in 2 different designations within a boundary focus area, which I'll show in a moment. And that was really to try to capture more buffer for the RENA of the 6th cycle, and then to build upon the success of downtown Solvang by utilizing 2nd floor or even 3rd floor spaces for future residential. That was something that was brought up by the GPAC and at the community through our previous workshops. C, this takes it up a step further, just throws out another likelihood of what could occur if that happened, and laid out the implications. It took the density up 1 more notch and also increased the height within the downtown core, just to allow that extra density. So it took the height up, I believe, an additional 10 feet. And as part of this, we worked with the GPAC to define what's known as a focus area, and this starts to hone in where we're looking to have, where we're looking at the implications of where change could occur. I think what's important to point out here is that most of Solvang is not expected to change. It's a almost completely built out community. It has established neighborhoods. No state law that comes in is really going to make an effect. The property values here are very high, so the likelihood of parcelization and lot splitting is very low, and we recognize that. So as part of this effort, we looked at areas that had the most capacity for change if it was desired. And that looked at your high density residential and then your tourist core commercial. Those are the 2 areas that we looked at. And primarily those areas also had the capacity for more circulation. The infrastructure was already there in place, rather than looking at periphery areas of the community. So here's our focus area. I know this is small, but it's this boundary outlined here. I did point out in the workshop, we've had questions, why do we have these weird fingers? That was actually a discussion of GPAC, and the GPAC felt it was important not to just focus on the center, but that Solvang has several gateways and entry points, and it's important to denote where you are and why you're here. So that's why these fingers extend along 246 and down toward the golf course. Those are all access points, and we're planning through future policy and goals to highlight that. And then, as I mentioned, there were only 2 designations we looked at that could accommodate potential change for consideration of the community. That was high density and then the tourist commercial. Everything outside that area remains the same. And the majority of that is single family neighborhoods. Those aren't going to change, and that's how we viewed this process. So following the workshop, we had about 45 people approximately attend. We pulled together a survey because we realized that with COVID, in-person participation at this time, it looks like we're slowly moving out of this, thank God, that we can shift back to in-person. But at that point, we had a survey online. So we had about 45 people attend, but we had 183 surveys submitted over a 3-week period. I will say for a community of Solvang size, that's phenomenal. I work in communities with 1 million people and get 30 surveys. So I just commend the residents for really taking the time. And if the council's had an opportunity to look through the summary, that's 65 pages worth of feedback. Very well thought out ideas and concepts that are brought to the table. So we had 183 participants. This is a snapshot of the survey. There were about 30 questions. I'm not going to walk through all 30. Spare all of you tonight, but I do want to go through some of the larger ones I think have some implications on where the general plan can head. So there are concerns relating to growth. So this question was, what is the most important concern you have about the future growth in Solvang? Not surprisingly, traffic, open space demands came in at the highest, about 30%. Another concern that came in was that it won't look like Solvang. Solvang has a unique identity, and there was a concern that new development coming in could potentially start to lose that uniqueness about the community, and that we should capture that moving forward in the project. We asked about the areas identified within the focus area. Are there any other additional land use designations that we should have evaluated as part of this process? 81% said no. The 2 designations were fine. There are subsequent questions which get into deeper detail on this. They're in large tables that are in the summary report that get into some of the reasons about why they felt no other area should have been evaluated. This continued forward. Are there any additional areas identified within the focus area that you feel should not be considered? And same with no. So we're getting a consistent response here. I did want to point out that a majority of the comments that came back on these 2 questions, the greatest concern was the increase of high density housing and the concern over future utility capacity. So as part of the 2 designations that were analyzed as part of the report, they were focused on multi-unit housing. So denser development within the core that could be utilized within current projects. So it's infill development, so current structures. We provided a range of contemporary multi-unit typologies for housing. Associated this were images that you could reference, and then these were the responses that came back about which ones were the most appropriate for Solvang. Multiple detached cottages came in at the highest. Here's an image of this here. I know it's quite small. The nice thing about multiple detached cottages, it's a multi-unit, it's a multi-family product, but it has that single family look. It's just small lot development. So it has that sense of ownership that sometimes you lose with apartment buildings or condominiums or live-work units. As the state is pushing for denser housing, they are looking at, SB 9 is one of these laws, they're looking at lot splits. ADUs allow 2 additional units by right that don't count against your density, and those are allowed on parcels now. So we asked a question of this, what is the support for the inclusion of duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes? Duplexes, the support was around 83%, and then that steadily dropped off the higher the units went. Not surprising, sometimes the triplex and fourplexes aren't as compatible with single-family neighborhoods. That really comes down to design standards or guidelines to make that fit. Preferred density. So what is the highest density you feel would work in Solvang? We went from 16 all the way up to 40. Not saying that those are proposed, just giving a range just to get feedback. 16 came in at the highest, around 42%. Most multifamily projects average about 20 units. The state is going to look for that as part of a housing element, but this gives us an idea of the typologies and where the community is headed. This was one that got lots of attention, especially when the report went out, building height. So I understand through this process and through the community feedback that there's sensitivity to height, views, the change in development and what it would do. The alternatives had a series of heights. 2 of them stuck with your current height maximum, which is 35, and 1 brought it up 10 feet to allow for additional development. This question as part of the survey was a sliding scale, where community members could slide where they felt was comfortable. 40 was the average number, so 40 feet in height. I know that number can seem arbitrary, 40 feet, what does that actually get you? That's something that we can work with the GPAC to explain a little further, and then they can make a recommendation up to Planning Commission, which will make it to your desk. But that's where the community was standing out of 119 responded on this question. Now down to the alternative preference. So we like to lay out these reports and then having the surveys go, if you picked an A, B, or C, if it was that simple, where would you land? 19% said none of the above. That usually signifies no change at all, no change across the board, which is perfectly fine. Alternative A, 35%, alternative B, 34%, and alternative C, a distant 10%. So this gives you an idea that the feedback that came through, the comfort level between the alternatives was right around A and B. There's tables that are associated with this question that go into each person's input that they typed in. I would suggest, if you haven't had a chance to read through it. Advocates on both sides of the aisle, it does provide some perspective that you might see through this process.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Going, for all the slides you're having a total number, and you had mentioned that there were 181 respondents to the survey.
Correct.
But I noticed that a lot of the surveys, we only had, there's a third of them missing, pretty much. They didn't answer every question.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it'd be great if we would have had all of the 181 respond to every single question.
Right.
Obviously, but.
In these surveys, we allow the option to skip questions. We've found, working through multiple exercises like this, that when you don't allow an option to skip, most people will close out a survey and you'll get less responses. So you did pick up on that. Not everybody answered every question.
Right.
Overall, still a plurality.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to pull 2 comments out in particular. So one for A, the comment was just trying to keep the charm that Solvang has. A has the least change. And then B, that which increased the density for housing. This comment focused on the availability of affordable housing while preserving the character of Solvang and how to make that compatible. And then support of none of the alternatives. No change at all, and that the community, that this individual has lived here for the past 10 years, doesn't want to change. We talked about mobility. The Fjord Drive extension was brought up. Took the temperature on the community's thoughts about that. About 64% out of 114, not the full 183. About 35% said no.
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
Sure.
What was the support and what was the anti?
The support was about 65% and 35% no.
To keeping it still keeping it, 65% yes to keep it. That's
So
my.
65% 65% felt that the Fjord Drive extension should be considered as an alternative circulation path as part of the general plan.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Well, you have all of the
problem is-
people
Yeah, yeah,
on the
yeah.
north
Yeah.
end and on Oak Street.
Yes, I totally get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Depending where you live in the community.
exactly.
it changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I get an earful daily.
This gets into parking management, and the question was, do you believe paid parking or time-limited parking can ease congestion? 60% said no, 40% said yes. And then this was just a comment I pulled out. This was pretty much what the majority of the feedback came back as, saying if you had paid parking, that people would look for parking elsewhere. So it wouldn't solve the problem, it would just push it out. And as part of the alternatives process, we looked at different styles of parking management, whether it's structures, whether it's paid parking, whether it's limited time, just to throw some items out that have been successful in other communities similar to Solvang, and then just start the conversation about should any of those be considered moving forward. Because if there is the appeal to move forward with something like this, not saying this would be it, that would get built into your policies and programs and your circulation element.
When we did, and this is just a question for staff, because I don't know if in the parking management end this was asked. Has it surveyed or have we figured out, in order just to leave it as it is, but if we eliminated all of the employees and the bosses that actually park in the diagonals, and just have it actually be for the residents and or the tourists, and had those at a special parking lot that only they're able to go to, and then have access, like a shuttle or something like that. Has that even been thought of? To try to keep parking as it is, but not have all of the people that work in Solvang and or the bosses that park in front of their businesses. They take up parking all day long and they're not even buying anything. And it's just another way to look at if we had specialized parking, basically like an employee parking for the businesses in Solvang, and have a place for them to go. They swipe in with a card or whatever, that keeps only the employees that belong to the businesses, and then we have some type of shuttle that gets them back to the business. How much would that open up the parking? To me, it seems like it would a lot, because I know of at least 10 business owners that park somewhat close to their businesses. And that's without having to even try to do any parking, just find a space for that. And I just wondered if in the parking study, if that was even thought of or brought up. I don't remember seeing it.
So the parking study studied the patterns of parking and traffic. So there was some empirical data that suggested that yes, based on the periods of time that people parked, that there was some parking occupied by probably employees of the city or within that area. So that finding was made. There wasn't. The study basically concluded with a few options of what the city could consider as parking strategies. One of those options was, for example, potentially partnering with private businesses using parking lots that are underutilized. So, a strategy like that could be something that may be considered down the line, which may work out as an agreement.
Yeah, that's like a joint use agreement for parking. I think part of what came out of this, and it gets back to what you're saying, Mayor, was the enforcement. Because there would have to be an enforcement arm, even for a parking structure or paid parking or metered or time, and even employee parking, there'd have to be an enforcement portion of that. And that was questions that were brought up of how that would be enforced, if there isn't that now. So, just points.
Yep.
Now look at this.
Sheriff's contract.
No, we can go back.
PowerPoint, please.
Pedestrian-only environments. Specifically, do you believe the city should consider additional pedestrian-oriented friendly areas? Answer, 59% yes, 40% no. And this was, we have a lot of comments directly tied to Copenhagen and looking to allow it to be closed permanently and have other improvements for pedestrian-only environment. So that's just everything in a nutshell. I went through that as quick as I could. I would definitely recommend, if you haven't had a chance to read through that, to take a read. There's a lot of really good information in there. So I wanted to hand it back to the mayor and the council just for some additional feedback that you have, and then I'll wrap it up with our next steps.
Are there any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, one quick comment. You're still listing incorrectly a high-density residential area on your map. It is not. It's 1.8 houses per acre, and you're listing it as high density. And you know which one I'm talking about.
The property you're talking about is Mission Oaks.
Yep.
Mission Oaks in your existing general plan has a high density designation on it right now.
But it's ridiculous to call it high density.
So the underlying zoning designation, you are correct. It's a DR 1.8, has a maximum 1.8 dwelling units an acre. That was brought up during the alternatives report. That was brought up through several comment letters that we received. We worked with city staff to go back through prior approvals, and what it looks like is during your previous general plan update back in 2008 that looked at the land use element, there was a map error to where that parcel was designated as high density and moved forward as high density. At this point, I understand for consistency reasons that's gonna have to get pulled out.
Yes.
But what we'll have to do is, in order to do that, because it's currently designated high density, as part of the recommendation for a preferred alternative or preferred land use diagram that the council will make, a recommendation as part of that to change the designation. Because that's a general plan amendment, technically, is what you'd have to do, because that parcel is currently with a different designation. So what we're recommending, and it didn't make it completely through, is that when the council goes to make a recommended land use diagram for the general plan, you also make the recommendation to have that designation changed to reflect the zoning.
I just had one question going back to the ADU deal. Maybe I'm wrong, but I had heard from the very beginning, they were back and forth on whether ADUs were going to count against or would be counted towards the housing element, but that's done now. There's no way that ADUs will be considered units for the state's mandates.
They can.
They can or can't?
They can. But they're gonna base it off of typically a 5-year average of how many ADUs have been developed within the community. And so we're working with staff right now to look at the development ADU trend in Solvang, and then we'll have to partner with HCD on refining that number. But yes, you can use ADUs towards your unit.
Okay, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Yes.
What percentage again did you say that responded? The total responses?
So 183 individuals took the survey. And as the mayor pointed out, not every individual answered every question.
And that's about what percent of our?
Well, 5,800 people.
Yeah. No.
Well, 5,800 people includes little kids and all that kind of stuff.
2,000 registered voters.
Yeah.
Approximately.
1.8%? No, 0.9%.
We always hope that you personally, but that we would have more people involved. I mean, I do this for a living, all over. And it's hard because you can't force people to take the survey. We worked with city staff to have information out a month plus in advance. It was in utility bills, social media, posters around the community, and the survey. That number may seem low for the population, but planning isn't everyone's favorite topic to take part in. And what we found is even that number that I mentioned in the beginning is relatively high. for most communities going through a similar process like this.
It just, to me, doesn't seem that way, and this is no slap at you guys. I think you're doing a great job, and it's really good information. But how do you make a decision, you know, trying to base it on what you think the majority of the community would like to see, when such a low percentage actually have something to say? And those are probably people who tend to be very involved in local activities and or a particular issue like Copenhagen.
Yes, but also those people elected you to pay attention to this stuff and to do what's best for the residents. So
Thank you for that.
It's kind of, they're putting the ball in our court, if you will.
Well, it will be. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I'm just, you know, have the conundrum of wishing, you know, I had a better feel for it. You know, and it gets down to where obviously it's going to be what I feel, and that's where we'll have to go.
And I will point out too, as part of this process, the city has a general plan advisory committee, or a GPAC. And that GPAC, which was put together in collaboration with the city, is meant to represent the community. So that's also another sounding board that goes forward. So that group is advisory in its role, gets to review this, you know, this alternatives report, the elements that move forward, and then they make recommendations. So I think as part of this process, there's an added step that is trying to provide a broad view of the population as best it can through that group, which is, I believe, 15?
15.
15.
Yeah. The question I had was, if you utilize alternative A, which is basically keep everything zoned as it is,
Sure.
does that meet our arena numbers for this time? And with knowing that the next cycle will be 5 to 8 years down the road after that, and knowing what the growth is anticipated, however you guys figured that out, going forward, leaving it as it is, does that possibly meet those arena numbers, or does it need to be like more option B? I noticed you mentioned that kind of gives you a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, not knowing where the 7th cycle will go, and that's kind of looking into the you know, magic ball.
Right. And the reality is too, is that all you have to do is, and this is what I think scares a lot of people, is all you have to do is plan for it. You don't have to build it.
Correct. Cities are not mandated to construct the housing, it's just to have the foundation there where if someone came in to develop, the development standards and parameters are available.
Right.
Even if alternative A was the final selection by the GPAC, the Planning Commission, and eventually the City Council, A would have the majority of land use designations would not change, but as part of the housing element, there would be minor tweaks that would have to be made per the RENA. But I can say now, as we're working through the site's inventory, the city's pretty well off right now, at least with the sites that we're finding. Your RENA at 191 and potential projects that are in the pipeline and vacant land. So you're in a pretty good spot at this moment.
I know a concern was utilities, being able to, the present utilities being able to handle the capacity. And all we're looking at right now is the capacity for Solvang, knowing we still have the Community Services District that also is a 20% partner with us in that. So whatever we develop with our water and wastewater facility, we have to make sure that that is part of that configuration as well in those numbers. And was that was not included in that, those numbers at 7,500 and 76 or whatever, as far as population growth moving forward, depending on what alternative you had, that does not include the growth that's outside in the community that we need to provide as well.
So that growth is bound by your city limits. So that growth is confined to the city's jurisdiction.
Right.
If there are areas outside of it that are covered by a CSD, that's not included.
Yeah. But we have to provide that because
Yeah.
we're under.
We have a contract with CSD for waste management. treatment.
So we have to be able to.
We have to be able to support that in addition to what we're looking at
You
here.
have a contract with CSD, but your land use decisions, you don't have land use control outside of this.
True, that's true.
But if they grow, we have to support it.
Right, and as part of this process, we do look at your sphere of influence for development, but we don't look at land use controls outside of the city limits.
Gotcha.
I want to explain too, there are a lot of questions that came up as this, well, what about looking at utilities? What about looking at wastewater? What about looking at water? All of those components are part of the environmental impact report. And those are analyzed and mitigated and provide implementation measures to cut down on any impacts that could arise from that. One question that came up was, well, when we get to that point, isn't the general plan already put together? Not necessarily. It's not adopted. Modifications during the EIR are not uncommon to make modifications to land uses, because once you get through and you go, oh, the traffic goes X, let's lower the density or lower this designation. It's not uncommon to make minor modifications after you have that full EIR analysis at the end. And as part of that, comment letters go out to all regional agencies, local agencies, and even the state, and they review it and provide comment and feedback too, and that also can take, it also can lead to modifications to policies and goals and programs.
Would you mind going back to where the map that showed the fingers?
Sure.
I can't find it, I'm trying to look for that.
Bring up Zoom or, oh, thank you.
Show you what page.
Um,
22.
Yeah, it's not our page.
Oh, of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, but it doesn't come up that way on this.
Take a look at page 121.
121.
Well, he's looking that up. Another comment, question for you, please.
Sure.
Option A, alternative A, does not leave things completely untouched. Because if I'm not mistaken, it adds 1,000 people, or something like that, or allows for 1,000 people.
Well, it does, because there is vacant land. There's vacant land within the community, and that vacant land potentially would develop. If we were to say zero growth, that would be no growth, and there would be a land restriction on all development.
Well, part of my point is that we need everybody to understand that choosing option A or alternative A doesn't mean everything stays exactly the same. So we need to understand a little bit about that, and that means everybody should be reading this plan. And yeah, we have some vacant land. Some of it is ours, some of it isn't ours. Some of it's not buildable that you've listed as vacant on your map. I mean, it's on the side of a hill and you can't do anything with it. Okay, it's vacant. I mean, it's really, it's not cut and dried. It's not as simple as it might seem. That's all.
So on that particular map, what I was just wondering is the finger to the east, none of that is in the city limit.
Right, so when the GPAC was looking at this map, they were looking at the sphere of influence and looking at areas that come into the city where there could be some coordination with the county and adjacent communities on policy regarding gateways and entrances. So a general plan is focused on your jurisdiction, your city boundaries.
Right.
But it also looks beyond that, because whatever happens in Solvang affects communities and affects the valley in general. And so that's where when on that map, looking at those fingers, yes, it might not be in your city jurisdiction, but there could be collaboration down the road on entries and gateways into the community.
Okay. Because I know that's not even, well, I mean, at this point, it's not part of our sphere of influence either. That far out, because it's showing it all the way to Quail, past Quail Valley. And our sphere of influence is north, and or a little northeast and west at present.
Your sphere of influence is this solid gray line here.
Right.
Your sphere of influence is not necessarily the UGB and is not necessarily the city limit line. Your sphere of influence extends out. So this arm here is still within the sphere. That, and on this, further, where you can see where 246 is cut off, the
Right.
sphere goes all the way to that 246 bubble. It narrows.
Really? I thought it went above Sunnyfields Park on the triangle. Up,
Oh, you're going
on the north.
Top.
I mean, no,
No, on the far.
on, right up there. I thought that was where the sphere of influence was, up in that area.
Yeah, the gray
If I remember the GPAC meeting, didn't we make some, were you in that meeting, Aaron? Why did we choose to put that sphere of influence all the way out 246 that far?
You know, it's hard to remember the exact, but I remember us drawing it out there and saying there's no more growth that can go out that way, but we should take our, kind of our influence, our, it's not a sphere of influence, it'd be less than a sphere of influence. It's an area that we have concerns about. We knew we couldn't go this way, we were gonna go this way a little bit, we were going past Sunnyfields a bit, we were heading out toward Janet Acres. And we thought that that would be a good way to kind of say that is our area. It's not a sphere of influence, a legal sphere of influence, although I know we've had that debate before of expanding our sphere of influence, as some of us believe we should, so that we had more control, and some people think that's pro-growth and don't want that to happen. I quite frankly trust you folks more than I trust the county, so, you know, we're, well, some of you.
You have our phone numbers, right?
Maybe not him.
How did you get that in?
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, that's what I remembered, is it's up more by Sunnyfields, north and east of that, and then even on the west end, where the Buell Flat Rock and all that area back on there.
Yeah, on the west side, on the other side of the castle area, just that
So
whole
maybe
field back.
maybe it's an AOI, area of interest.
I'd say that when we were looking at this with GPAC, we looked at every single parcel, and that was definitely drawn to the sphere of influence. It's a little bit harder to see on this small map, but
But those dotted lines, when we had the GPAC meeting, we asked, because that was not what the consultants originally gave us as a thinking process around that, and we added those extensions out there because those directly influence the city, or we directly influence it. We can't do anything about it, but it's something that we need to be aware of, I think is basically what we were talking about.
We were talking about access to the city and going outside of the city, because traffic keeps being a topic that everybody's interested in. So the GPAC felt that we needed to pay attention to entryways, things that,
Right.
the ways that traffic flows into Solvang. And I remember there was also some discussion on this entryway about what happens if development happens there, if you have loss of greenery and scenery, whether the city should have a clearly marked entryway that designates this is Solvang as a destination. And I believe that there was some interest in keeping a separation between Solvang and the side of the, coming from Santa Ynez. So those were two concerns, traffic and also the scenic value of that entryway.
The finger on the east, and even what you're looking on the west side,
The big finger towards Santa Ynez.
somebody's doing this, right? You know? But that finger there, really, to me, I'm just looking at the map, looks like the Caltrans easements and the bike lanes and the right-of-way coming into Solvang. And nothing that anybody would be able to develop, because it's actually all Caltrans right-of-way. Within 25 feet of all of that, both sides of 246, all the way to the bike lane that's bordering Hoyle Valley and going down that way. That's the only one that we actually have a separation, and that was huge on that transportation plan for Caltrans District 5, that they're trying to figure out ways that they can do more of that on the other ends and what we can do through solving. So it is definitely an area of interest. I don't think it would be one that would be able to be buildable for anything like that, but I do understand the concept. I just was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, the intent wasn't to build in the sphere, because the city has no control.
Right.
It was mainly for gateway enhancements and entry points. It's not uncommon for communities to have gateway signage not in city limits. And that's a collaboration with property owners in the county.
Right.
And I do want to point out that 246 is included in the sphere of influence determined by LAFCO. So that finger is fully in the designated sphere of influence for the city.
That's a long way up there.
It is, yeah. It goes out pretty far. It's the blue line.
Yeah.
Of the blue, yeah,
That's all I had, just as far as general comments. Just wondering about that. Do we go to public comment on this right now?
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone in-house that would like to comment on this item? Aaron? Yes, introduce yourself, for the record.
Aaron Peterson, Solvang, and I'm on the GPAC, so I just want you to know, it's a tough process. And some of you've been at those meetings, because some of you serve on it, and it's tough, it's a collaboration. And so hopefully we're listening, not only the surveys, but hopefully we are out listening to people at groups and neighborhoods and things like that to try to bring back what people want to do. To Councilman Clark's point, it's a representative government, we just do the best we can, or else everything would go to initiative, right? So big things could go to initiatives, but there's a lot of stuff that we've got to be able to do. Regarding housing, it's great to hear that ADUs could be or partially used. We also talked about the mixed use that we have in commercial, and we can have residential above commercial as long as it is less than 50%. So we're looking at, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we can maybe zone it a little bit better, not just saying it's a use that's allowed, so that maybe that could be used toward our counts also. Now at the same time, you can't put housing units above Rasmussen's gift store without ripping the whole roof off and do it. But if you're allowing, it's the same thing as you can't build on a hillside. Well, you can with caissons and spend the money and do it. I mean, anything can be done. Point is, we don't have to make it happen, we just have to allow it to take place, like the ADUs. You know, the ADU law now is basically triplex every city in America. You got an attached ADU, and then you've got also a detached ADU, so you've got triplexing, which is a huge change. So anyway, that's the stuff we're going through. But and the surveys are interesting. I agree with you all. No, you know, not Fjord Drive, not a bypass, but let's close Copenhagen. Let's close Copenhagen, but we're short parking. We don't want to pay for the parking, and so we don't want to build the parking lots. We don't want to drive them in, and we wish that owners wouldn't park there, but we don't want to do a parking lot. We want to close Copenhagen. We don't want to bypass. And as we've all said, Solvang is a stinking hourglass tipped on its side. And to talk about the 20% of sewer that we've got to take, we got to take 100% of the cars from each side of this valley, because we can't stop them with armed guards. So we don't have a choice over what they do there, and there we don't have any influence. We have talked to GPAC many, many times in general terms of, gosh, we sure wish we'd work, and I'm not being critical of anybody, closer with Buellton on growth, closer to San Ynez and the county on growth, because this traffic is becoming more and more horrific as the surveys show, and we all have experienced it. Anyway.
Aaron, you and I had this conversation almost 10 years ago.
Yes,
at the
we have.
Planning Commission,
Yes, we
and how what people on the left of us do and what people on the right of us do, they're going to do their own thing.
Yep.
And we've talked to Buellton about that. They're like, pound sand.
Exactly.
Okay, so we got to deal with it.
So we gotta do
very
it.
good points, and this is something that's not going away, and we've been dealing with this for a long, long time.
I
Thank
feel
you.
bad for the folks on Fjord, or if it goes through, that's way down the road, but certainly the folks right now on Oak and over on Viborg, then Elm, that get all that pushback traffic from 246.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep.
Any comments out in Zoom?
There's no more participants with us at this point.
Nope. Okay, we'll bring it back for final comments and direction or action.
Do we have anything? I'm just accepting the.
Just receive it.
It's just general discussion, there's no specific action that needs to be taken. Brent, I just want to get to the slide about next steps. If you could pull up the slide again.
Perfect. So just want to point out some of the critical next steps moving forward. So next week, we want to have this meeting before we go to the GPAC. So we encourage the GPAC to watch this council meeting to hear your feedback. At that GPAC meeting, what we'll do is we'll work through the three alternatives and the community feedback that we've received so far, and try to come to a consensus on a GPAC preferred land use alternative, what we call it. And that recommendation will be made to the Planning Commission by the GPAC, whether that would be A, B, C, or some hybrid of it. So that's going to be a big meeting, as the public comment had alluded to. It's a lot of hard work, and it's going to be a roll your sleeves up moment for that. The next step after that is we're going to bring their recommendation to a joint session with both Planning Commission and Council, and that is scheduled for March 7th. That's where it heads to you folks to come to an agreement and make a formal adoption of a land use diagram that'll make its way into the general plan. That land use diagram will then influence the goals and the policies that the GPAC will start to work with moving forward.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Peter.
Thank you, Brent.
Moving on to item number 6. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 6?
Receive Tourism Advisory Committee recommendations for marketing services, operating structure, and scope of work recommendations, and provide staff with policy direction.
Thank you. So I'll present the brief report about the TAC, Tourism Advisory Committee recommendations. By way of background, on January 24th at your last council meeting, you were presented with some prior TAC recommendations as well as a staff recommendation. And your direction at that point was for staff to work with the Tourism Advisory Committee to further refine recommendations for marketing services. So the Tourism Advisory Committee met on February 3rd. There was full participation by the members. As I mentioned before, they elected Cheryl Schallenberger as the chair of the committee. The TAC discussed with a fairly robust discussion the marketing services structure and the scope, and they made their recommendations as is captured in the motion. And the motion was made by Committee Member Beard to recommend that the City Council explore reinstating the SCVB and form an ad hoc committee of Committee Member Beard and Chair Schallenberger to work on the development of a marketing services RFP. This was seconded by Committee Member Grenier and carried unanimously by the vote of 6-0, which currently we have 6 members with 1 vacancy. So today we're here to receive further direction from you based on the TAC recommendations. There was a request made at the last council member by Mayor Pro Tem Infante to have a TAC member be here and explain or present the recommendation of the TAC. The recommendation is captured by their vote. Unfortunately today, or fortunately, unfortunately today is the Valentine's Day, so the TAC is out celebrating. They are available if there's any further questions at the next council meeting, but they're also looking for your continued direction. So the alternatives that we have is that you could discuss today and make specific, give specific direction to staff if you choose so, to work with the TAC, to continue to develop the scope of work for an RFP and essentially work with that ad hoc committee. Based on the motion that the committee made, you could also direct staff to make findings regarding the status of SCVB and prepare recommendations. And you can also provide staff with policy direction for organizational structure for marketing services. So the TAC, throughout their discussion, have expressed the desire to have a marketing administrator or a marketing person that's local in Solvang. So you could provide staff with policy direction to establish or explore organizational structure to enable the city to hire or contract a marketing administrator manager to manage marketing for Solvang full-time locally. That is kind of where their discussion was going. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
Comments? Yes.
Yes.
So I attended that meeting, and it was very interesting. Basically, one of the reasons that I asked for the TAC to come up with the scope of work for the RFP, because the RFP presented by staff last time was, it had half a page of scope that didn't really say anything. So I thought it would be more appropriate if we were gonna go to an RFP that we had a definition of what it is we expect this body to do. So one of the comments that came out of the TAC meeting when I was there was, let's just reinstate the SCVB. It's still in existence, okay, has 2 board members. But according to our esteemed attorney and our city staff, it would actually be better if we just forgot that altogether and created a new organization that would handle things for us and be the local representation. It could be a contract. I don't want to suggest a city hire. I really don't think that's the best way to go. But a contract person that could actually sit over with Parks and Rec. We've got office space over there that would be local, would be here. So every time you wanted to plan an event or anything else, it was a coordination person. That kind of a situation involved. But because of the way, as I understand what the attorney said, was the organization of the SCVB as it exists today does not give us much control. So resurrecting it would not necessarily be a good approach. But either way, however we do this, we need to get some information about who could handle it and what they would be willing to do and what it would cost us. So I completely agree with the idea of having the TAC put together a scope of work. The RFP that was presented to us at the last council meeting had all of the legalese in it that you needed, and then some. I don't know if I should blame the attorney or the city manager for that. But anyway, it's all there. So all we had to do is replace that half a page, almost scope of work, with a real scope of work, defining some of the things that are said right here. We need to have a local representative. We need to have some people that support him or her. We need to have a representation that we can have either an impact from or control. We may have the capability to subcontract out to marketing to somebody like Cogs and Marble. Don't know. But those were all their ideas. I completely agree with them. And I'd have to leave it to smarter people than me when deciding about the SCVB.
Any other comments?
I do have a comment. I'm not necessarily advocating for the revival of the Solvang CVB, but I have a hard time understanding why we would feel that we have less control. Because my understanding is that the CVB operated as a non-profit. Is that correct? It had it was set up with a non-profit status?
It was set up as a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation, I believe, and it predated even me with the city. I think it was set up in the early 1990s. The issue that we're having right now is the 2 officers that remain are former council members. There's no board currently existing for it, and doing any kind of business operations at all for the corporation requires the cooperation of those officers who are not working with the board. And it's an unusual situation that the SCVB, in its articles of incorporation, has a provision that says the city council is supposed to ratify the board of the SCVB. It's unusual for a city to have that kind of input into a private corporation, whether it's a nonprofit or a profit corporation. So there's just some complicating factors in going with the SCBB as the structure currently exists. Now, if those two officers were no longer officers and a board was appointed, then it might be effective in that situation. It's just difficult in its current iteration.
Okay, because what I like about it is that, for one, if it's a non-profit corporation, they're supposed to have open books. We are allowed to go in there and audit and see the list of expenditures, and is that right?
The Attorney General has the power to do that. I mean, they're the ones that are going to be regulating the nonprofit. There's certain reports that they have to do. If the city council is interested in oversight, the easiest way to do that is keep it in-house. Rather than having a separate corporation, because there's always going to be that separation of legal entities if there's a separate corporation. So you can dictate through contracts what you want that corporation to do, but ultimately to have control over the management, the direction of it, it's easier to do that through in-house.
Okay. The other thing that I like about it is having a board that is, whose members are, local hoteliers and business people and so on. You have a board that is, supervising and working with whoever the CEO is to direct them into what Solvang would want. So rather than having a tourist advisory committee that kind of tries to figure out what to do, you have a body that is constantly working with the CEO to make it happen. So maybe it's easier to start a similar organization from scratch rather than trying to revive these organization whose board members might not want to work with us. But I just don't want us to dismiss that model, because I do think that there is some value to it.
I agree. I don't think it's a dismissal of the model. It's a dismissal of the specifics of that particular nonprofit organization we know as the SCBB versus creating our own that's to the city's advantage and not to the SCBB, not to mention whatever personality issues might arise with the two remaining people on the board. Did I say that politely enough?
Well done. I'm trying to figure out and just get my head around, do they want, is this request based on what the old SCVB did? Because the old SCVB did nothing with special events. And my concern has been from kind of day one, actually maybe day 30, after the Yule Fest stuff in 2019, is the people that are running, the organizers who are trying to put on special events here are not getting cooperation, they're not getting any communication, and it's lacking, and there's no local support or no local person the day of an event that's special, that if there's anything that needs to be done or handled, it's not handled because there's no one local to do that with the model that we currently have. So it used to be when SCVB was doing the marketing, because that's really all they did, and their scope of work was marketing only and a taste of Solvang. They added the stomp, the grape stomp, and that only happened, I think, twice, and that was it. And then they were in charge of the Yule Fest activities, similar to what IDK is doing now. But all of the special events used to be held and were participated in by myself as a community resource deputy, one staff person from the recreation department, and the supervisor for the maintenance department, because we had the capability of taking care of all of the issues that would come up. For instance, street closures, getting the street signs out, everything was done legal, working with Caltrans to get the permits when we needed to close the highways. What are we actually wanting for our RFP? Because what I hear from almost every single organizer, because they still all have my phone number, is that there is there's nobody local that they can contact prior to the day of their event. And that's what I'm hearing. It's not about the marketing aspect of it. It's about the special events. And
These are things that you just put into the
Right.
criteria for what you're looking for.
right,
So I think you're on the right path.
And if I may, I spent some time with city manager discussing the problem we have with events, in that if, let's say, Cogs and Marble comes up with an event, who lets the city staff know that we need to have the toilets cleaned more frequently, or the park swept, or, trash picked up? What is the interface there? And we don't even have that stuff. There's no events on our calendar, on the city site.
right.
So one of the things that city manager said was, well, okay, we'll improve the calendar and we'll start putting events on there and letting everybody know. There has to be a calendar on the city site that Parks and Rec can go to, that an events person can go to, that the public can go to, because if I want to have an event, I gotta go see what's available.
Right.
And I don't even know what's being used, what park, what time, what day, those things. So that's all part of it, but that's on us, for one. And now we just have to bring everybody else in. So if we bring in an organization that can do what you say, handle the events, and maybe subcontract out to marketing, and have the person in-house that anybody can contact, then we solve our problems, I think.
I agree. I mean, I just feel that's what I've been hearing from a lot of the organizers. And it's not just one, but multiples over the last 2.5 years. So,
If I may make a couple of comments on that. It's one of your considerations whether or not you keep special events together with the marketing contract. You're absolutely correct that combination was created when IDK was brought in to the city to manage events and then became the marketing contractor. So those definitely don't have to be together. You can consider the special events being handled more in-house. Frankly, it's still the city that authorizes those events and permits. One of the problems we have been having under prior contracts is that the city wasn't notified timely by an outside contractor to where we weren't aware of the plans. So what we are doing under the current contract, and we've put in much more descriptive terms into what's required of the contractor for the contract through the end of July, to where we're working with Cox and Marvel now as the contractor to ensure that there's not only deadlines for those who are submitting applications, but there's also deadlines from Cox and Marvel to the city to present the plan in its entirety with everything that we need to know as the city in order to communicate with our participating departments and in order to actually issue the permit. So that is something that's in the works, and there's 2 different processes for permits. We will be bringing specific item for your discussion in the next, in a near future agenda. One issue is with organizations that are applying to the city as a third-party organizer. So that's where we will have those very discrete agreements between us and Cox and Marvel as to when and how they submit that information to us for permitting. And the other one is the events that Cox and Marvel would be putting together as a marketing event, such as the Yule Fest, for example, as the actual producer of the event. So for that type of event, what we have been working on improving under the current contract is that the Cox and Marvel contractor would have to present specific program for the event to the city, which would start with, I meet with them on a weekly basis. Then it would go to the TAC for their review recommendations. And if it's a new event that hasn't taken place in Solvang before, it would come to City Council for approval of that specific program. And then the contractor would be required to conform, reasonably conform in those terms and produce the event that they actually have presented to the city as the final product.
I think another discussion would be in this, with going with the special events, we historically had an event almost every month of some magnitude. And that was all approved way back, probably 15 years ago, I think, maybe 13 years ago. And every month had an event, and it was all grandfathered through, but a permit had to still be done. I mean, that was part of the process. And again, it's to let everyone in the city know, staff-wise, what's happening and what to expect, and then it made it easier, whether it was a third-party organizer or not. But I know it got to the point at some place that we were not physically able to provide the staff to be able to do all the preparation for getting the barricades and the traffic devices out. And you know, it got down to where the city staff was only able to put out the no parking signs 48 hours in advance of the events, and then do a little bit of the cleanup. And so it kind of morphed, and nothing ever really got changed. Some things did, some things didn't, but those are some issues. Is, you know, we tried not to have events that would close downtown back to back. Those were considerations given, you know, 16 years ago, because we didn't want to close the streets. We wanted everybody to be able to go around town. But now we're maybe thinking of closing Copenhagen permanently. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's a thought that's going out there. So now what do you do with the events that have typically had Copenhagen Drive as a special event, and that they were utilized right on that street? Those are all considerations that will need to be thought out sooner than later, because we're going to be getting to the point where people are going to be wanting to come back and do events here. We've lost a few because of the lack of communication with our special events persons, and they may not be coming back, and maybe Solvang residents are happy about some of them. But I mean, I know that I had a call this last week related to the old Solvang Century, which is the bike ride. You know, we had at one point, you know, 3,000 to 5,000 people would come and descend into Solvang. It's the largest participatory bike ride in the state of California. And that we had that designation for a long time. It always happened the March right before daylight savings time. And we lost that 5-6 years ago. For other reasons than just Solvang, but you know, they're asking now, they want to bring the Solvang Century back to Solvang because they don't want the Solvang Century in Buellton. I understand that, but is that something that we really want to do now that it's been off of our radar for a while? Business owners, would they want to be able to do that? Because again, it's dealing a day with, you know, thousands of bike riders, essentially. So those are some events that they're calling me because they know me and knew that's what I did. But we need to, as a group, decide maybe going forward what we actually want to have. Because I know in the past, the issue was trying to close down some of the roads trying to make it easy for all the businesses, because some areas closed down more frequently. I know the farmers market for a long time, the vendors and the businesses that were on First Street between Mission and Copenhagen, they would complain because every single Wednesday, the street was closed and people couldn't drive to their business. You know, so you bring in other events that require closures, and we also need to have to rethink how we want to do parades. Because everybody loved the parades in Solvang when we closed down Mission Drive, but is it better to just do the small route? That was one that the route that we're using kind of now is one I proposed 16 years ago when we were trying to redo some stuff, and it's interesting how that's coming forward.
It's a lot cozier.
It's cozier.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't impact the traffic as much as closing down Mission,
Right.
which routes traffic all through this town, that crosses.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that was, I mean,
there's pros and cons to all of it, you know.
There is.
Historically, people love to be able to go down and parade on Mission Drive. I mean, that
Oh,
was,
yeah. It's cool.
that was it. When you're a kid growing up and you're in the band and doing stuff, and it was a way. But, you know, now going forward, our circulation is a huge consideration.
Yeah.
And closing down Mission Drive for any length of time is a big deal. We see the impact when we close it down for the half marathon. So I just think whatever we figure out, it just, special events they really need to be local. We have to have somebody here to be able to deal with the people.
Absolutely.
Going forward.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If it's appropriate and if he's willing, I'd like to hear comments from Aaron, because he's been involved in this for so long. I'd like his thoughts on.
Well, he'd like the bike ride because they eat lots of hamburgers.
No, I'm not talking specifically about the bike ride, but about the organizational aspects of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron Peterson, Solvay. Yeah, I served on the board, I don't know, 8 years or 6 years or 4, I don't know. It's a long time and a long time ago. Haven't been on it for 6 or 8 years. I think that the feeling of business folks in town, twofold. Let's talk about events. Events for events' sake is not what we want the town to be. We're not an event center. We're not a convention center. We're a town. And what we caution everybody about when we just do more events and more events is making local people angry for closing down streets for another event. Now, Bob's got a great event. Danish Chase is a great event. 4th of July is obviously, I mean, we could sit down and figure out the events that work for everybody. If you bring in outside events, they're for profit. They're coming in to make money, and they're coming in to make money to charge, whether they're entrance fees, whether it's a bike or a ride or whatever. They're selling food, they're doing barbecues, they're doing those things, and they're using us. I won't use the word, but what they're doing to us is they use our town, and we hope that, oh my gosh, we filled up enough hotels and restaurants and made enough money that we paid enough for the porta potties and everything gets cleaned up. I don't necessarily believe that's true. So events for events' sake is wrong. Now that's a general. I think that what Shelby does is fantastic, bringing in hotel guests. That's paramount to this valley and obviously to the city of Solvang. Shelby doesn't look for, and that's not their standard operating, to bring in day trippers. We cannot survive on just hotels. You fill every hotel with 2 or 3 people, it's a drop in the bucket for the millions of people. I think the study from the GPAC is 1.5 million people a year. Multiply out the hotel rooms, it doesn't even come close to that. It's tens of thousands of people. So we need day trippers. So what Shelby does is different. What an event coordinator does is different. We also need a group that looks at how do we advertise. So you've got IDK, I don't know what their new name is. IDK, you got a Shelby, you got an event thing. We need an umbrella organization of 5 citizens, 6 citizens, 7 citizens who sit on a board. You guys pick, just like the planning commission that I'm on. You need a staff person, just like we have a staff person that sits at our planning commission. 1 staff person is hired. They have an office. Maybe it's a second staff to answer phones, so that you have a staff controlled by you guys. You guys set the budget. There's a volunteer board that serves a year or 2, very similar to what we had before, but with more control by you folks so that it doesn't run amok. That person, that staff, helps coordinate every single event. That person also coordinates RFPs when we hire an IDK or an ABC or an XYZ or whoever we want to hire to do the social media. Social media, we used to do that on the visitors board. That's gotten so sophisticated now, you really need IDKs to do that kind of stuff. But you need a local board of a hotelier, a retail person, a restaurant person, a wine person, and I advocate every time a local who does not own 1 bit of tourist business in town to make sure that our locals are represented, that we don't just run amok. We can become so successful in town with numbers that we just piss everybody off in town. And they don't want us then. Then they blame the traffic on my restaurant or on that hotel or on your business, and all of a sudden everybody's angry at everybody. So we need to keep things coordinated, and the only way is to have a city council, in my mind, I'm not speaking for TAC, I'm not on TAC, have a staff with an office, with a physical location, with telephones, be able to do it, get a board, serves, you guys appoint those board members, you hire this person. You look at the GPAC, I was reading through that tonight, that's really what I was coming to just chat about, because my involvement with that. How much we bring, obviously you all know this, you know, what sales tax and what our hotels bring to the town is 60–70%. Part of that person's job should be to also educate the locals as to what tourism does, but keeping tourism at a reasonable level. And that is primarily traffic, in my mind. And events do disturb a ton. And I was really questioning the 4th of July parade and where it was going to go. And, no, Christmas parade, because that's when it didn't go on 246.
Right.
It turned out pretty darn good. I mean, surprisingly, worked pretty good. And 246 was kept open and people liked it. The locals did, and they thought it was kind of cool. So, anyway, that's my thought. And they need to come to you with a plan. Here's our calendar for the year. You can't just show up in August and say, I want to do an event in October. We need to have that set out a calendar. And don't sell our town out, you know, by just having outside events come in. We could all pick the 10 that are necessary and should be here. Yeah. My thoughts.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron.
May I just remind you, you have a public
I
comment?
do have, yeah. If there are any final comments up here, I'm good at public comment.
I only have one comment, is that when you look at COVID, not the height of March 2020, but COVID has been good for business for Solvang, because people stop going long distances and they're coming here. I think we need to brace ourselves, folks, that we might see that if we do get to the endemic phase of this pandemic, then people are gonna start getting on more planes. And
Well,
going
back to
Phoenix.
Disneyland.
And seriously, so there might be a little bit of change in the kind of flow we're gonna be getting, so it's something we really need to stay on top of and be proactive, so that's my only comment.
All right, thank you. We'll take it out to public comment, and I do have one speaker slip, and that would be Bob Stokes. Three minutes, Bob.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Bob Stokes. I am the president of the Wheels and Windmills Car Show organization, and I've been the coordinator of that event for over 15 years. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure, honestly, of working on both sides of the coin, so to speak, working with the city and then working with IDK, okay? And that's the reason I'm here. When I found out that this was going to be an item, I felt obligated to come in and say something anyway. As you all know, we had to postpone both 2020 and 2021 of our car show. A car show that all of you are very much aware of if you've been in town for any length of time at all. We've done a lot of good things for the city. The one reason that we have is because our whole purpose was to do something for the city. That was our charter. That's what we started to do, and that's what we do to this day. All of our money goes to charities, okay? We do as much work as possible within the city and within our open areas when we contract anything out, okay? And the last thing is we use sponsors, and Aaron knows that. We use sponsors to pay for the bills, because they get the recognition. Our website is nothing but recognition for our sponsors. So I think I can be somewhat of an authority on events in Solvang when it comes to what we can and can't do, okay? Before, and Charlie, I'm gonna use you a couple of times because you and I worked together through this whole thing and we've seen the goods and the bads of it, okay? We had many times where we didn't always see eye to eye, okay? And that's gonna happen. You know, you can't please everybody, it's just not gonna happen. But we worked together and we got through virtually every one, and some of them were pretty significant, but I had the idea that the city had my back. They were gonna be there when I needed them, okay? When IDK came in on board and we lost our people here, it just killed us. For an event that takes 8 months to plan and get prepared for, all of a sudden, I have no contact. I had a contact, but I couldn't get a hold of them, okay? And that was really, really tough. Now, I won't blame them for the first few months. The pandemic took care of that. It was almost impossible to get anything done, and you guys know that as well as I did, so I'm not even gonna dwell on that. But when we finally got the go-ahead, it became very difficult to get someone that had their finger on what's going on in this town, okay? So we had to do something, and we came up with contingency plans and everything, but I was going to go through a lot of problems that we had with IDK, but I'm sure you guys probably know most of them already. The biggest one was that the support we needed here in town was not available. And not only was it not available, but I kept getting promises that they were gonna do this, they were gonna do that, and most of them didn't pan out. The day of the event, even though it didn't, those of you that were there, it didn't look like we had any issues. We had tons of them. And we were scrambling the whole day, just trying to make it work. Because for the most part, although they did a good job of putting the barriers around the outsides of town, they did nothing inside. We had no barriers in our staging area, we had no barriers in the middle of town for certain things. We found out by accident about the Winston House, the hotel that is on First Street. In the past, from 2019 and before that, it didn't exist. It got built during the pandemic. I found out about it one day before the event. And we were supposed to have blocked off the street on First Street for their entrance. Didn't even know it existed. And that's because we had no one in town to let us know that it had been finished. This is just one example. We had a number of other examples, and I'm not gonna go too far into it, other than to say, what you're thinking about doing, please do it. It's important that for events like mine, which we don't know how much longer it's gonna go on. And if we have to deal with companies like IDK that don't live here and understand what we do, our event can't keep going. It just can't function. So, please, it's the best way to go. We'll do everything we can to help. And we do want to put on the 16th annual Wheels and Windmills Car Show this year. But we don't know whether that's going to happen or not, and a lot of it depends on what the city of Solvang does. So, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, please, people, let's make this happen.
Any questions? What date were you thinking this time? Because it was October last year.
Well, and for those of you who know a little bit, Xenia knows, because she was in the middle of it, we had to change our event and have a special event because we wanted to do something last year. So the Solvang Fall Classic was that event, and we put that together in about 2 months, okay? It was a reduced event. We did it in October because we didn't get the go-ahead until the end of June, and it was impossible to put the Wheels and Windmills Car Show together in a month. So the October date was chosen basically as a compromise. What we found out was that date was cool, and cool in that it was a beautiful day, and you couldn't ask for better weather, okay? October isn't always beautiful. I mean, it isn't always a great thing. But first and foremost, and you brought it up, they didn't want back-to-back events. We used to be on the weekend after Labor Day, but that backed us up to Danish days. So we moved to August on purpose to help with the city and the way they wanted to do things. And we were on August, end of August, the weekend before Labor Day, for 15 years. We would like to go back to that, and the reason for that is as simple as your reasons for your tourists, okay? At the end of September, you drop off the table because everybody goes back to work, all vacations are over with, and your input to Solvang slows down. Well, the same goes on with car shows. The people that come to the car shows and the people that bring their cars are those people. So we used the end of August because it gave us the best chance to bring in the most amount of people on that one day to provide the services and the buying people necessary to make it work. It also provided us with more money for charity. So that's why we chose that date, and we have tentatively set it up for August 27th. And we hope that we'll be able to do that.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. I appreciate the comments.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you. That's the last speaker slip and no other comments in-house. So is there anyone on Zoom?
There's no participants on Zoom.
There's no one left. Okay. All right. Bring it back for final comments and no actions required other than direction.
I would like to have at least general comments because we need to move forward with this process. So the TAC recommended, as I mentioned, looking at the structure of SCVB. So for staff to be able to continue to work with TAC, we would need some direction from you as to how you would like to handle that, as well as they do have the subcommittee now formed to work on the scope and the RFP. That process will be happening, and it's planned to return to the entire TAC at the March meeting for the entire TAC to look at the proposed scope of work. So if your direction remains to continue to work on the RFP, then hopefully the TAC as an entire body will have agreed on March 3rd on that scope, and then we could issue the RFP. But if you have any specific comments to bring back to the TAC as far as what should or should not be included in that scope, that would be helpful as well. As this discussion took place, I think it's obvious that the classic marketing services is kind of one thing, and then the permitting is another thing that's currently with the marketing contractor.
So it sounds to me like we would like to have somebody in-house handling special events and facilitating communication between organizers, city, and whoever needs to be involved to make it happen. And marketing, they might still produce events, but they will have to work with that coordinating person to make them happen, and also would have to coordinate with them to make sure that events are going on the calendar and everybody knows what's going on. Is that what we want to do?
From my point of view, I think what the TAC is asking us is, do we approve that they go write a scope of work for the RFP? And I would concur with that, and I would move that we approve that. But I would take yours and say, in that scope of work, we would like to ask any respondent to say how they would set that up so we had a full-time person here. And we can provide the facilities, I guess, like I said over there, without hiring a city person to do it, but let the contractor put a person that sits in an office over across the street here at Parks and Rec, assuming that there's space available, which I think there is, but someplace.
We can put them in the Halloween shed.
Yeah, that's getting affirmative over there. Well, maybe they need to provide the space. Maybe we should not say that we would provide. But what you said is got to be part of that scope. We're looking for somebody to come in with an organization that can coordinate all events from a marketing contractor with the city outside, that is a single point of contact that's here 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, kind of thing. How does that sound?
Okay, so this person's gonna be, I guess so we're looking for a contractor that's gonna do, they're gonna figure out how to do marketing, and they're still gonna handle our events, but they're gonna be.
Well, let them tell us if they can do that. And maybe they subcontract to marketing, maybe they subcontract to Cogs and Marble. for events or marketing.
For-
or
right,
Do the
right.
social, I mean, what Aaron was talking was the social events, or what do you call it? And maybe they subcontract out to somebody like that to do that work, but they are the primary coordinator of all the events. I mean, one of the things that city manager was just saying is that they're supposed to be bringing us these events to approve. Well, I was at the TAC meeting, and Scott was there from IDK, Cogs and Marble, saying that they wanna put on a Lego event. It's a competition of some kind that apparently is big in the state. I know nothing about Lego, so. But I don't know where we're gonna do it, who's gonna do it, we haven't heard enough about it, and it's supposed to be done in 45 days or something like that.
Correct.
Has anybody else in the city heard about this?
So the next steps on that particular example would be that, yeah, we're dealing with a little bit of a time crunch again. So we're essentially going to have to work with Cogs and Marble to back work to where, from the date that we need to have the event to making all the process and approval happen. It's not ideal. There may be asks of the TAC to hold a special meeting in order to review the scope of work, which is the process that it should be going through. And then in order for Cogs and Marble to be able to produce still, we would also need to timely bring it to council for your approval.
And that's kind of my point, is we haven't heard about it, and the time is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And we'll go back to Mr. Peterson's comment. Do we need all these events? Do we need a Lego competition event? I forget what the holiday was he wanted it for. Wasn't it some holiday coming up in 45 days? I don't know.
No, it was just
Just
the time in when there is,
Well, why
slowdown.
was there a time limit on it? I thought there was a restriction because it was around some holiday. It doesn't matter. My point is that we need to understand what they wanna do and when they wanna do it, and they need to have the time to plan the whole thing if we approve it. So we need somebody to coordinate all this and get it to us, is what I guess I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, and the tourism committee, purpose or part of their work is to make those recommendations. So the reason that this particular event right now is being planned is because the TAC made a recommendation to hold an event in the first quarter of the 6 months. Then they had subsequent discussion and decided to slide it a little bit, just based on hitting a time when business is slow in Solvang. But that's still production-wise, there needs to be 45 days minimum to produce it, and that's where we are going to be going through this process rather quickly, and as I mentioned, may have to hold special meetings for that.
I know, see? So I would go with Councilmember Aronda's comment that we need to have somebody in-house. So that the scope of work that I'd like to propose that we approve for the TAC, I think it was Cheryl and Tracy to do it together, is to identify who could fill that role. I'll call it an SCVB, just because everybody seems to know what that is, but not necessarily that organization by name, but that function. Somebody that can come up with a board that has a full-time person that anybody can approach anytime. Is that a good motion? Wow, I'm not getting any agreements.
I mean, it's general direction, right? Yes, go come up with the FRP so that we can do it, but we want them to consider that, yeah, we need somebody that coordinates in our side, whether it's somebody that, that somebody does it more on house, or that can coordinate with everybody, not somebody in San Francisco that isn't.
I feel it's 2 RFPs.
And
One for media and marketing, and the other one for events. And SCVB, however anybody wants to say that, that wasn't there. They didn't do special events. It was marketing. Marketing and heads and beds. That was the quote, heads and beds. For decades, heads and beds. And the only events they did that they produced were the Yule Fest, Taste of Solvang, and a couple of year times they did the Grape Stomp. And that was it. The rest of the time, There was local people, I mean, not saying the SVB wasn't local, because obviously they were, but the rest of the time, it was our staff that took care of all that. And there was a reason why there were events that were already in place, that are grandfathered here, that everybody historically knows. Why are we not even hearing about an event that, what's it even gonna do? What's the impact? That 45 days from now, the way the contract is written for special events, you have to contract with everything and have it all in place within 30 days. And they're just discussing an event. That's the whole point of what we're trying to say. I feel, at least that's what I'm trying to say, is there shouldn't be a need to rush through events. They're approved because everyone knows it. And they're approved months in advance. As Bob said, 8 months to plan a car show for one day. And a lot of the Danish days takes a long time. I understand, they have all of the pieces in place because it's a historical event and it's been there, but to get the people to do it and to go through the process, to get the road well, not that we have to do the full parade now with, Caltrans approval, but that usually required 60 days in advance, minimum, to get the approval. So I just feel that what I'm looking for is someone to do the media marketing and someone to do the special events. And I kind of feel that's where Councilmember Arona is
Yeah,
at
I
as
think
well.
it's making sense that we have somebody in-house that knows
And if
how
it
long
turns out,
takes, who you contact, who it affects.
if it turns out it's the same person, so be it. But I think they both need to be handled differently, because what we're asking the marketing arm to do is they don't have to necessarily be here. But we are asking the special events person to be available, and to be available on those days that the special events are going on. Because they have to be, to take care of any issues. That's what Tim and I and our staff, we had 3 people always at every single special event. It doesn't need to be me, I'm just saying, but that was the staffing. It was always there. So if there was an issue, we could take care of it. We knew how to shut down a street. We knew what the fire codes were. And because they didn't have, what he was talking about, that hotel, they had an illegal way.
He's just saying we need another Charlie.
But I'm just saying, those little things like that, that's what people remember, and that's what makes the event special. And it makes them smooth, and that's what made Solvang special, and why for a long time we were like, we did more special events and parades here than anybody in the county, even Santa Barbara. And and everyone loved what we did because it was a small town feel. And that's the whole point of what our special event should be. This is my 2 cents. But I feel it should be 2 RFPs, a marketing one and one that's for special events, knowing that we're requiring whoever is the special event person to be local, someone to be here, so it's a boots on the ground type of thing.
But isn't the marketing going to market the special event?
Yeah, but that can be done from a phone call and everything else. The special event is what requires the personnel to be here.
If I may, clarify who markets what right now. So the marketing firm does not market the car show, for example. Their organization markets their own event.
Right.
So what marketing firm markets is those events that they actually produce. So for example, this Lego one or the Yule Fest, that's the events that they market. And if you had a separation between events permitting and handling the logistics of the event here in town, the marketing firm that you hire could still produce events and market those events, or however you want to set up that.
But we're gonna have a person here.
Right, so one of the nuances I am not clear on so far between the TAC and the council discussion is that TAC was actually interested not so much in, or actually their discussion didn't even address so much the handling of events. What they were really interested in seeing is a full-time marketing type of person here in Solvang. So I think those are a little bit different approaches.
Is it, I think what the mayor has explained about the difference between marketing and events was never, at least the last meeting when I was there, was never made clear, I don't think, to the TAC. So I think they may have thought the same way I did, that marketing would market events, would market everything, and wasn't as much a separation as it was a subsidiary of that SCVB type organization.
The TAC was presented before with materials about the historic structure and how the city used to handle events at the city for permitting and logistics, as well as the marketing scope that the city used to have. So they have had that information presented to them.
Okay, that was just me, just being ignorant.
I mean, I don't know, do we need some more clarification? Or are we-
I think, yes, even if you don't take a motion, but that would be helpful, I think, to move this discussion. If you could provide some direction as to how you would like the TAC and staff to continue to work on the RFP. Right now, I think the question is it 1 or 2 RFPs? And are you providing any additional direction in terms of the marketing itself and requiring a person here full-time in Solvang?
My thought is it could be 2, and it could still be 1 person or 1 organization that does both. But it gives us more options, I feel, to just have it done separately.
But if we have it done separately, then I think what I'm hearing is that we need to have whoever does the marketing pass it through, well, no.
It's
doesn't have to
not
be-
necessarily passed through, it needs to just be shared.
Yeah.
So that whoever it is, whether it's Wheels and Windmills or Danish Days,
Yeah,
or it's an event that the city does, you know, the Halloween parade for the kids, or just something that's just local, the fireworks show. Whoever that is, they're gonna assist with that marketing of any event that's gonna be coming and solving. And the organization, such as Wheels and Windmills, they do a lot of their own advertising. But that was one of the differences for a long time. No one knew some of the events that were going on, and there's always been that discussion to have the marketing arm, somebody create a calendar that's a global calendar for our valley. That's not around, because what would happen is organizer would come in and they'd want to do an event here, and then you find out there's one similar already going to Los Olivos or in Buellton or Santa Ynez, and there still needs to be some type of sharing. I know it's getting convoluted, but it still feels like, I mean, we're still a small enough valley. We need to be sharing information for every event that goes on, because whether, as Aaron said, you know, we are the hourglass and we're the pinch point, whatever we do here does affect every side. And by and large, if there's a huge event at the casino, they're going to affect Buellton and Solvang to get to the casino, and vice versa. There's events that people don't like going 101, they want to go by Lake Achuma, and so they're gonna drive this way to get to Buellton. And so all of us as far as events, we all affect each other to some degree. Maybe not the same impact that when we do something here in Solvang, because we are that pinch point. That's a given. But as long as everyone in the valley knows it, you won't hear as much about the complaints.
so maybe we should say in the scope of work that we should be producing a valley-wide calendar?
I don't know.
The CVB used to do that. SolvangUSA.com used to have a calendar where they would input the events, but also any person, any organizer could go and input their event in the calendar, and it worked really well.
That would be.
It didn't start off that way, and that was something like, that's what I was meaning, it's like it got into that because we were finding there was some similar events going on, and you're trying to have every place share some of the wealth a little bit. you know, and that includes your media advertising.
So, okay, let's go back to what I think the city manager needs to go back to the TAC.
Sorry.
Okay.
We are going to ask the TAC to come up with a scope of work. And now here's the question, for marketing and for RFP for marketing and events as two different RFPs? Or one RFP that includes both but separates them in the scope?
It could be either, it could be that.
If I can add also, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
basically what we're discussing right now, let's put that on the TAC and have them discuss that and see where they come out with it.
And let them come back to us?
Yes.
That's a cool idea, I like that.
It's the same thing we're tossing around now, let's have them do it, make a recommendation, and say, let's, yea or nay.
I like that.
I like it too.
Okay,
Does that work for
Can
you?
down the road.
all right. Thank you.
And hopefully we find out what that event is in 45 days.
It's gonna be great.
Just wait.
They're always great.
All right, moving on to item number 7. Madam Clerk, would you please read the item?
Appoint Tourism Advisory Committee member due to resignation. Tourism Advisory Committee member Barry Prescott has resigned from the committee, resulting in a vacancy for the seat appointed by Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Clark may appoint an alternate committee member or direct staff to open a recruitment.
So based on how the TAC is organized, each council member appointed one appointee and then 2 appointees were appointed at large. The current vacancy exists because the appointee of Councilmember Clark has resigned, and it's Councilmember Clark may appoint another individual to that seat.
Yes, I do, and I would appoint David Brents, the owner of Succulent Cafe and Solvang resident, to the TAC.
Thank
I
you.
nominate.
Thank you. This does not require a vote by the council, it's our appointee.
He'll be at the next meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm happy.
Thank you.
And with that, item number 6. Any reports out? Council closing comments? Thank you all for your time and being here for all the meetings that we have, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you,
Not sooner. Meeting is adjourned at 9:28.